When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
This is The Planted Runner. I'm Coach Claire Bartholic. What does the word mastery mean to you? In some sense, it's when you've reached the top of the mountain. You've learned everything there is to know, and the only thing left to do is retire or teach. But what if nothing can truly be mastered? Is it still worth the chase? In running, for example, can you ever truly master the marathon? Matt Fitzgerald thinks so. Welcome to The Planted Runner. I'm Coach Claire Bartholic, and my mission is to help you improve your running, your mindset, and your life with science-backed training and plant-based nutrition. Today's conversation is with runner, writer, and coach Matt Fitzgerald. We talk about the concept of mastery in running and how it can help you improve at any age, why some runners never reach their potential, and how you can get closer to achieving your running dreams if you really want to. I've interviewed Matt at least 4 times now, and it's always an amazing conversation, so I was, of course, happy to have him back. And don't forget to stay tuned all the way to the end of the episode for another Mental Strength Minute. Fortify your mind in 60 seconds or less. And now, here's my conversation with Matt Fitzgerald. Welcome back to The Planted Runner, Matt.
It's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So you are here today to talk about mastery. So what does the word mastery mean to you? Can you ever truly achieve it?
Yes. So mastery, there are competing definitions of the word. I did a deep dive in the etymology of the word, and, people forget, like, words, aren't discovered, they're invented. So everyone has a right to interpret a word the way they want. So I have my own. For me, mastery, at least in the sport context, connotes just being in control of yourself as an athlete. There's some obvious things that we do not control as athletes. I mean, things like the weather are right. One, but even like the way your body responds to training, you aren't really in control of that. You control the training, right? But you know what I mean? And so, there are certain parts of the sport that we do have a large degree of control over. And the journey toward mastery for me is just learning to use that control to your own benefit as an athlete. You can think of it just in terms of, the decisions you make. Every single day, athletes make lots of decisions, big and small. And to move toward mastery is to make more and more good decisions and fewer bad decisions.
Yeah. Well, it seems like if we're talking about mastery as control, we're never going to be 100% in control. It's always going to be a chase, right? Are we always chasing?
Yes, I think so. I look at it in 2 slightly different ways. One is, it's a developmental process. Movement toward mastery is a developmental process. So you have a certain amount of potential. It's inside a black box. You don't really know like what your ultimate potential is. And you're trying to go from, day one as a runner, you've reached 0% of your full potential. And you're trying just to move toward 100%. And And it's really a learning process. You're just learning to be as good at your sport as you can be. And of course, you're never going to stop learning.
Right.
There's like no final lesson, which is good. For me, I started running when I was 11. I'm about to turn 54. So I like the idea that I can't like finish the learning process. That being said, in the book, I break down that developmental process into 5 stages. And, there is a final stage. And I think, you can, arrive at that stage. And there's no 6th stage to get to, but you can continue learning within that final stage of the developmental process.
Yeah. I mean, what strikes me is that the finish line is always moving. The bar is always raising. So it's like, the marathon, for example, let's say you want to hit 4 hours in the marathon and you work to it, you do it. And then you're like, well, I've done that now. Now I've got to go to 350. Now I've got to go to 340. It's always like the more. And do you ever really achieve it, or is there always more? There's something about human nature that we always want more.
Yes. I'm actually glad you kind of put it in performance terms, because I do make a distinction between performance and fulfillment of potential. Because again, even performance, you're not entirely in control over. Right. For me, I mentioned that I started running competitively when I was 11. I think that I did not reach that final stage of my development as a runner until I was in my 40s. So I was actually past my physical prime. And this is the nuance I think is hard for a lot of runners to wrap their heads around. Like, you can keep getting better at your sport even after you've stopped setting PRs and you've sort of aged beyond. Performance, there is a correlation between performance and mastery, but mastery is really about doing the best you possibly can. And, the races where I felt like, wow, I really nailed it. Like I nailed the preparation. I nailed the execution. It wasn't a PR, because I was, 47, 48, 49 years old. But it was a better performance. Like I was able to get more out of myself than I was when I was in my physical prime.
I think that's a good distinction. One thing you bring up in the book is self-regulation. What does self-regulation have to do with mastery?
Yeah, self-regulation is a term that really just comes from biology. Honestly, it's the way biologists look at how living organisms of all kinds pursue, control their own behavior in pursuit of goals. Goals can be like getting food or mating or, building a nest or whatever it is.
Right.
And self-regulation is exactly that. It's like how an organism uses the control it has to achieve its goals. Now, if we're going to focus on human beings, self-regulation, has various dimensions, but a simplified way of looking at it is that there are three things that you have a good measure of control over as a human athlete. One would be your thoughts. You don't have total control over your thoughts. Like, your thoughts will just come to you, but you have a fair degree of control. If I tell you not to think about a pink elephant, you will think about a pink elephant.
Of course, yes.
And then, the second one would be your emotions. Again, you don't have total control over those. It's like, emotions will happen, but then there's then what? And that's where you have, and that's actually where most of the research on self-regulation is, especially like in child development, like, kids learning how to, channel their emotions in productive ways. And then the third one, obviously, is like your behaviors or actions. Like an obvious one in running is pacing. Every single moment of every run you do, you are actually, without often being conscious of it, you are making decisions about like how you regulate your behavior. Like, do I speed up? Do I slow down? Do I hold steady? So self-regulation is just like how you use the control you do have over your thoughts, emotions, and actions. And then there's so that's the x-axis. The y-axis would be those thoughts, emotions, and actions can be helpful to you as a runner in terms of like helping you get to your goals. They can be harmful, they can hold you back, or they can be kind of neutral. So that's another way of looking at the pursuit of mastery. Like you're just trying to, eliminate, again, to your point, you can't entirely eliminate them, but you're trying to eliminate the unhelpful emotions, thoughts, and actions and maximize the helpful ones.
Yeah, I mean, this really goes down to the classic debate. Is performance about your brain or is it about your body? Because, the thing that I get asked about the most besides physical training questions are, how do I change my self-talk? When I am at mile 16 of the marathon and my brain says, slow down, this is too hard, what do I do? So a lot of people think they don't have control at that point. So yes. What do you say?
Yeah, that's a good one. Because that's the subtlety of it is like, right. Athletes often don't realize just how much control they have. If my knee starts hurting me at a critical point in my marathon training, like I have no choice but to be worried. Or, if I'm 6 weeks out from an important race and I start to doubt whether I have enough time to get the fitness I need, like I have no choice but to be anxious about that uncertainty. The trouble with those beliefs is all it takes is one counterexample, one runner who, gets the knee pain and, they might have an initial, oh crap moment, but then it's like, you know what? It's just pain. Pain is mercurial. There's a lot I can do. Worrying about it won't help at all. In fact, research says that like worrying makes it worse. And so like, it just takes one real flesh and blood athlete who proves that you actually do have a choice in those situations. So that's number one, just like taking a step back and realizing, oh yeah, there's just simple proof that I do have a choice in these situations. And then, it can be hard, if you're in like the heat of battle and you start, things are tough and you start having that negative chatter in your head, it's a little bit too late maybe at that point. You might be able to pull a rabbit out of your hat, but the time to work on that is in the training where you can, just break out of patterns that are holding you back. So you could, use implementation intention exercises. So you might be going into like a hard marathon specific workout. It's a little bit of like a dress rehearsal for the big show. And you can go in and with like if then intention. So, if I start to slip from the pace, like here's how I will, here's like a positive, you can't do untrue positive thoughts. They have to be true. Right. But you could have these implementation intentions where like, if this happens, I have a plan, and then you don't get blindsided or taken off guard when you are in the heat of the moment. You're like, there's that expression that soldiers use. I fell back on my training. The bullets started flying and, there's a part of you that wants to panic, but it's like, oh, I did all this training for this. And now I have something that I can fall back on. So yeah, you have to practice it before the big show.
Yeah. You have to practice the negative. You have to put yourself in a negative headspace to teach yourself how to get out of it. That's kind of counterintuitive for especially our culture that says, think positive thoughts. You actually have to practice being negative. And I don't think a lot of people do that.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's really like it's like a psychological parallel to what you're doing physically. If you are an improvement seeking runner, so you care about your times and you're trying to, you have to make yourself uncomfortable in training, right? Like your body's not going to adapt unless you give it something to adapt to. So there's simply every runner understands this. Like, yes, I have to work hard enough that it feels hard. And so you're wide awake the whole time you're going through this process. So guess what? Your mind is along for the ride, and it's going to be hard for your mind as well. And, I think a lot of athletes, to your point, they think of that as just like a sideshow that you have to put up with, but it's like, it's half of what you're trying to do. Like, yes, you want the physical stimulus, but you also want to I make a distinction between physical fitness allows you to do hard things. Mental fitness allows you to deal with hard things. And you always have to do both simultaneously. Your mind has to be as good at dealing with the hard stuff as your body is good at doing the hard stuff.
Good point. One thing that a lot of runners struggle with is not just the self-talk when they're in a race or in a workout, but when a workout goes wrong. So, you're doing, a tempo workout and you just can't hit your paces, or you feel like crap that day, you totally blow it. And then you say to your coach, if you have a coach, you're like, that was a terrible workout. My training is so off. This whole cycle has gone to hell. How do we bounce back from a singular hard workout? And I guess my real question is, a lot of people want to run off feelings and they can't be trusted. So what do you say to them?
Yep. One thing I do in those situations is I point out to that runner who's kind of over-indexing on a single bad workout, because that's what they're doing, right?
Right.
They're forgetting everything that came before. I'll say, okay, look at like a recent record-breaking performance, like maybe Grant Fisher broke a couple of world records indoors, and I'll tell the runner, if we look at Grant Fisher's preparation for that world record, I can guarantee he had at least one really bad workout. So like that's just normal. It's absolutely part of the process. Like even the greatest runners on earth, the greatest who have ever lived, have days like the day you just had. So they're going to happen. They're part of the process. The other thing I'll say is, and this is simply true, it's not your bad workouts that tell you how fit you are. It's your best workouts, because it's simply impossible to outperform your own fitness. Right. When athletes talk about, I'm worried that workout last week was a fluke, I'm like, it can't possibly be a fluke.
Like, you either did it or you didn't.
Yes. Yeah. If your body did it, then your body is capable of doing it. And, it takes a lot of things lining up to have a really great workout, but any little thing that isn't lined up can cause you to have a substandard workout. So, what matters is how the process is going, not how your last run is going. Now, if you go 2 weeks without a good run, then probably something is amiss and we need to make an adjustment. So of course there's going to be like a natural human response, like a disappointment to a bad workout. But even the greatest runners have them. They're a normal part of the process. And you need to index on your best days, not your worst days. That's simply rational and being fair to yourself.
Yeah, I like that. So mastery by definition is the extreme, Yep. Does anybody reach their potential? That's a question that philosophically I struggle with. I would say no, almost no one reaches their potential. And maybe, Grant Fisher has reached his potential. Right. Who knows? But maybe he hasn't. It's maybe a new pair of shoes, or maybe a new tweak to his training plan, and he'll run faster next year. It's an extreme way of living, honestly. Yep. And we romanticize it a little bit. Yep. We aspire to get there, but 99.9% of us don't ever get there. So why do we fall short?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think it's just inherently very, very difficult to reach the limit of your potential. I mean, first of all, you're right. You can't know. It's fundamentally unknowable. Right. I mean, how do you even measure that?
The limit is death, right?
Right. Yeah. And even then you don't know. So you don't know. And it takes a lot. In another book I wrote, which is about also fulfillment of potential, called The Other Talent, I make the point that there isn't a single, at least when I wrote the book, there isn't a single American runner who holds a national record in any distance running event, just say from 800 meters to a marathon, who also set a national record when they were in high school. And what that means is the ones who are setting national records in high school are not setting national records as adults. And that's normal, actually. When you're at the beginning of the developmental process, talent rules. It's just like if you have 110-year-olds race a mile, the kid with just the most natural ability is going to win the race because there's no training, there's no development. But if you just like, okay, now you're all runners, and now you're just going to see where you can get. And you do another 1 mile race like 10, 15 years later when everyone's fully matured and they've had a chance to develop in the sport. It's almost guaranteed that a different kid's going to win the race. And there's just, adult now, and there's just going to be a reshuffling. So you have to be the best at learning and developing over time. And the statistics show that like almost nobody, even the gifted athletes who are highly incentivized, it takes so much, like consistent, progressive, hard work over years and years and years, and a lot of learning. Not everyone can be the best at learning. So there's just a lot standing in the way of reaching your full potential. The good news is, who cares? Right. Seriously, it's like, because, in terms of like how you experience it, if you're constantly comparing yourself to the perfect future version of you, then I think all the fun is going to be bled out of the process. But you can be making progress continuously. And actually, that's why I like the mastery mindset, is like every single day can be a success, because as long as you're learning, you're moving forward and you're moving toward mastery. And so you can just have a little bit of a looser hold on the numbers and the data, and more of a focus on the process. And am I moving forward in the process? And then, that mastery orientation can just be a joyous way to experience running. And it's like, I would love to feel like I mastered my sport someday in the future, but I'm better today than I was yesterday. I was better yesterday than the day before. So, hey, what is there to complain about?
After a short break, I'll be back with more of my conversation with Matt Fitzgerald. The Planted Runner is sponsored by Liquid IV. As the weather starts to warm up, you know that dehydration is a much bigger factor in your running, and water alone is not always going to be enough on those sweaty runs, which is where Liquid IV comes in. Liquid IV's formula, powered by Live Hydroscience, is clinically shown to maintain hydration better than water for up to 4 hours. All you need to do is add a packet to your water bottle before your run, and you're ready to go with their true-to-fruit flavors, because when it tastes this good, there is no excuse for not staying hydrated. Find all your favorite hydration multiplier flavors on their website, from lemon lime to pina colada. Break the mold and own your ritual. Just one stick plus 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code PLANTED at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code PLANTED at liquidiv.com. And we're back with more of my conversation with Matt Fitzgerald. Yeah, so it's a moving target, because when I think of mastery, I think like you've made it to the top of the mountain and then there you are. You've done it. It is in the past and there's no way to go from there. But you say there's always more mountains to climb.
Yep, I believe so. Again, like unless you're able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, "Oh yeah, I'm done learning. I can't possibly learn anymore." Then for me, like I feel like I have mastered the sport of running, and I'm way past my the point where I'm going to run faster than I ever did. But in terms of what it feels like, I developed long COVID. I got COVID very early, and then I wasn't able to run for more than 3 years. And then last year was able to get a little bit of my health back and a little bit of fitness back. And I decided to sign up for the longest race I'd ever attempted. Still, older than I'd ever been, with a chronic illness that I mean, some of the main symptoms of long COVID are exercise intolerance and post-exertional malaise. So like aerobic exercise is literally toxic for people with long COVID. And I gave myself 10 months to prepare to run 100 kilometers in 100-degree heat in the desert. And I wasn't running at all at the time. I hadn't run in months. And as far as I knew, I couldn't run. But when I signed up for that race, I believed I could pull it off. That's what mastery feels like. And I wasn't insane. Like I knew I was attempting something that was almost impossible, but I knew because of all the experience I had, all the learning I had done, like I didn't know the answer on day one of that process, but I knew I could figure it out. And I did. And I made it to the start line of the race and I made it to the finish line of the race. And I had confidence throughout the entire process that I could pull it off. That's what mastery looks and feels like. But even then, I mean, did I learn a lot along the way? You bet I did. Did I make mistakes that I would like to correct in the future? You bet I did. So it's kind of both. You can feel like in one sense, yeah, I've arrived. Like I'm in a new place, as an athlete. And at the same time, you also know that there is no mountaintop and you can just keep going as long as you like.
Yeah. The confidence before you actually do the thing is another thing that a lot of athletes struggle with. So,
yep.
The classic thing is a first-time marathoner. They've only run 16, 18, 20 miles in training as their longest long run, one of those. They've never run the distance. And they always say, well, if I don't run the distance in training, how do I know that I can do it on race day? So how do you have the confidence to do something you've never done before and know that you can do it?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, part of it is just to give you another personal example. When I did my first Ironman triathlon, I had never done an Ironman triathlon before, but I knew other people did. And I remember, I did the swim and I did the bike ride and then I'm out running the marathon. And I remember like taking those first few steps of the marathon and thinking, my legs feel exactly how they felt when I finished my last marathon. and I'm just starting one. And like, the voices of doubt came in. It's like how is this even possible? But what I told myself in that moment is, well, Matt, like you did exactly the same training not exactly the same, but you did pretty much the same training as has been done by, thousands and thousands and thousands of successful Ironman finishers. So in that sense, it didn't matter whether I had done it before. I just knew there was just evidence that what I was attempting to do was possible. And then the other thing about confidence is like, if you need absolute certainty to feel confident, then that's not real confidence. Confidence is belief in yourself in the face of uncertainty. So yeah, a little bit of a both and answer.
Yeah, no, that's okay. What I tell people is you need to have courage before confidence. You can't have confidence first. Yep. You've got to do the brave thing. That's is sort of tied also to motivation. Probably the athletes you work with and most of the athletes I work with, they don't struggle with motivation. They are highly motivated runners trying to get, the best out of themselves. But there's a lot of people who struggle with motivation when it comes to whether it's running or fitness or doing anything hard. They're like, I don't know if I want to get out of my comfort zone. So can you teach motivation, or even with a highly motivated athlete who might have a down day? Is there any way that we can enhance motivation?
You bet there is. In endurance sports, I mean, motivation, is important in all sports, but in endurance sports in particular, it has a special importance. Just because your limit is really perceptual versus physical in nature. If you throw a runner on a treadmill and put the belt at a certain speed and say just run till you can't, and when they actually step off the treadmill, any physiological measurement you take will show they could keep going. The reason we stop is that it just feels too hard. You encounter a perceptual limit before anything actually breaks in your body. Like the harder your body's working, the harder it feels. And like if you're a sprinter, you do the 60-meter dash. Well, that you're limited. Your performance is limited by physical stuff. How fast can you turn over your legs? How much force can you apply to the ground with your foot? Those are just hard physical limits. In endurance sports, if you just interrupt any given runner at any given point in a marathon and ask them, like, could you be running faster right now? The answer is always going to be yes, except like when they're within sight of the finish line. So, we are encountering perceptual versus physical limits. And those perceptual limits are real, but they're real in the way that like pain tolerance is real, where they're kind of mutable. If you overheat, it's game over. You can't will your way through like exertional heat illness. But the garden variety of like, this is too hard, I feel like slowing down, that one, the more motivated you are, the more you can push through it and get closer and closer to those hard physical limits. So there is no such thing as too much motivation as a runner. Now you need other things too, otherwise you're just going to run off a cliff. So, but there's no such thing as too much motivation. And you can look at like examples of supremely motivated runners, the ones who clearly like leave it all out there when they compete. And it's like, hey, are you there yet? If you're not, then then you can be more motivated. And finally, to get your question, like, how do you do that? In the book, I talk about what's known as what is it? The self-determination theory, which is like kind of the leading theory of motivation. And there are three main levers you can pull to get more motivated or to increase motivation. One is autonomy. You have to feel like you're doing things by choice and you have a measure of control. As a coach, I do this. I mean, they hire a coach because they want me to do a lot of the thinking for them. But I love to give my athletes options. Say, hey, I'm thinking we could do A, B, or C next week. And I've already pre-vetted those three options. So I'm fine with all of them. But you're giving the athlete some agency and a like sense of autonomy and control and investment in the process. And that increases motivation. It's proven to do so. So anything you can do to increase your sense of autonomy or agency or control is going to increase your motivation. Two is competence. So we become more motivated when we feel like, hey, this is working. Like I'm getting results. I'm getting better. And I think a lot of athletes, they make the misstep of like wanting like proof that they're getting fitter every single day, like from their watch. That's a dead end. But if you have that more process focus, then you can have those wins every day. That proof of increasing competence. It's like, oh, wow, like I really nailed my execution of this run. It doesn't mean you ran faster than you ever did before. It just means like you were more in control of the process. You were able to be intentional and mindful in going about your training. And that can give you like a daily dose of competence, a feeling of competence that increase your motivation. And then the last one is relatedness. Which is, we're social animals. I like to point out, like, if you don't think, there's those lone wolf runners out there. So, I always do my training by myself. It's like, yeah, okay. Do you race by yourself? Because you could save a lot of money just by measuring out 26.2 miles and doing a marathon. Would that be very satisfying? No. So like what makes sport meaningful and exciting for us is that it is a group thing, at least on race day. And so even if you're introverted, there are ways that you can increase your motivation for running by taking advantage of the fact that you are a social being. Like almost all of us are going to perform better in some kind of group environment, or it could be as simple as having one training partner or having a coach. Honestly, like that is a relationship that can increase motivation through relatedness.
Yeah, I'll get into the coaching part in just a second, but you said there's no such thing as too much motivation. But I mean, I would say the flip side of that coin is when you get too singularly focused. Yep. There are a lot of runners, and I include myself in this category, who become obsessive with it.
Yep.
And that is all they do, to the detriment of everything else in their life. So, is that something that we need to be looking out for as well?
It is. Yes. Yeah. So just to refine my earlier point, just forget about the training and how obsessive you may or may not be in the process. When you get to race day, all the preparation is factored in. You can't get any fitter once you're on the start line. Then the question is like, how close to a 100% effort are you going to give during the race? There's really no good excuse. Like, if you claim to want to do the best you can, now you can run a race for any of a million reasons. You can do the party pace thing, or, just do it for a finisher's medal, or just to experience a nice course, whatever. But if you're racing, then, there's no reason, you can't try as hard as the person who wins the race, right? That's right. Entirely on you. That's what I mean when, and that's hard to do because it really hurts quite badly to run that hard. So that's what I mean. Like, there's no such thing as too much motivation, because it's only the most motivated athlete who's going to finish the race and say, yes, I absolutely could not have tried any harder than I did. And then you can take that same mindset and put it into the context of your training and preparation, even as, you could have like a busy, fulfilling career that's very demanding. And you could have a family that is always going to be your number one priority ahead of sport, and still have like that supreme motivation to make the absolute most out of the time you do have to run. So it's not about necessarily just like, quitting your job, getting divorced, and like becoming wholly fixated on running. And then, just to get back to the spirit of your question, there's, I've been fortunate to know a lot of, professional runners and world-class endurance athletes. And, it used to be surprising to me. It's not anymore, like how well-rounded these people are. Like, it's usually like the really hardcore amateurs that are super obsessive and one-dimensional. And I've never seen that. It always ends up as self-sabotage.
Right.
Psychologists have a term called self-complexity, which just refers to like how many like real true facets you have to your life, like how many identities that you really, invest yourself into, and an extreme lack of self-complexity where you're just putting all your eggs in one basket. I mean, first of all, it's like, why are you doing that in the first place? It's probably not even coming from the healthiest part of your psychology. And then like, once you do that, it can like, I mean, what happens when you have a bad week of training, and there's nothing else going on in your life,
right? Or 3 years of COVID.
Yes, That's exactly, yes.
Yeah, you have to be a little more well-rounded, or you just absolutely fall apart.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So let's go back to the coaching bit. You and I are both coaches, so we're obviously very biased and think that everybody should have a coach. But, if you are going to invest in a coach, it's not just about, hey, I'm hiring someone to tell me what to do, because that's what a lot of people think is that I want a coach because I don't want to make decisions and I want just an expert to tell me what to do. So what's wrong with that?
Yeah. I mean, it's understandable, like that perspective, but it is also naive, because, for me, I mean, there's all kinds of coaches out there, but I view it as my job to help guide athletes toward mastery of the sport. Running can be a lot of things. It can be me time. It can be like a spiritual outlet, a way of connecting with nature. But for me, like, it's a sport, and so if you treat it as a sport, you're trying to master the sport. Well, your coach can't do that for you. Like, mastery is all about like being in control. And so, most of the athletes I coach remotely, so I can't be there on the ground to make an excellent decision for them in the middle of a workout that goes sideways for whatever reason.
Right.
Like they need to be able to do that for themselves, and they sure as hell need to be able to make good decisions for themselves in competition. I've done all I can at that point. I wouldn't race for you even if I could. So you're not going to master your sport unless you actually get to the point where you don't need your coach anymore. So that's kind of on my side of it. I look at it as I'm trying to put myself out of a job. Now, I mean, even Olympians have coaches, so you can not need a coach and still benefit from one. In fact, you're probably going to benefit the most if you've gotten to the point where you no longer are dependent on the coach. So, if I'm coaching like an absolute beginner, like not only are they new to running, they're even new to sports in general. Mm-hmm. They've never been an athlete. They've never had a coach. From day one, they need a lot of like just me saying, here's what you should do, and trust me. But from the very beginning, I'm giving them opportunities to take control of the process, and that can start with like baby steps at the beginning, and it's really fun. Like for the athletes I work with for years, you can see just an amazing transformation happen over time, where the athlete is like they'll come to me and say, there might be some challenge they've been facing that doesn't have an obvious solution, and we've been trying to work our way through it, just muddling along. One of the most satisfying things that ever happens for me as a coach is when the athlete says, I have an idea. I think we should try this, and it works. That's good coaching.
Yeah. One of the things that I would say that my athletes get most frustrated with me is that I don't give them splits for their races. They want to say, okay, I've got 26.2 miles. What should I run for mile 1, 2, 3? They want exact splits for the entire race. Can you just program my watch and tell me exactly what to run for the marathon? And they get so frustrated that I won't do it. But this is exactly the reason why, is because hopefully if I've done my job, I've trained them to make decisions in what to do every single mile of the race. You're training someone to be an athlete, not a robot, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go ahead and give them those splits, and they could do their best to follow them, and they are very, very unlikely to run the best race that they could have run that day, because like nobody has a crystal ball. Like, who the heck knows? I mean, you have some idea, right? But that's why I love the word performance for racing, because similar to like a theater actor, they do the rehearsals, they learn their lines, but none of that is a guarantee of like really making the audience feel what you're trying to get them to feel. Like, you have to do it in the moment. And you could be on Broadway doing the same play 4 nights a week for 2 years, and no two performances will be the same. Every single one will be different. And that's exactly why you can't program a race. And like, we should embrace that, like it's an opportunity, because a lot of runners are going to mess that up, but you don't have to be that runner.
Right. So, when it comes to training for the marathon, it's kind of like it's like baking a cake. It's a recipe, you follow whoever wrote your training plan. Hopefully it's your coach that knows what they're doing. But there's a lot of different recipes for baking a cake. But there are some kind of universal things that you want in a cake. You want flour, you want sugar, you want oil, Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you feel are kind of the basics? And what are some of the things that are kind of, you talked about individuation, things that an individual might want to tweak?
Yeah. I like that question. Because, when as a coach, when you start off, coaching an athlete that you haven't worked with before, I mean, they fill out an intake form, you have an initial consult with them. So, you know something, but you don't really know that athlete yet. So like, where do you begin? You begin with, just kind of like those general principles and, accepted best practices. And you just sort of, you treat them as human, basically, and the individuation starts thereafter. I mean, you have to give them something, and it's pretty safe to say, okay, Well, we know that most of your running should be at low intensity. So I'm known as the 80-20 guy. Didn't originate that idea of like doing 80% of your training at low intensity, 20% at higher intensities. But I'm going to start there because if you're human, that's probably going to be pretty close to like the optimal ratio for you. Consistency is number one. So I like to, I mean, even if you're not a competitive athlete, you should probably be doing aerobic exercise like most days. So like I will try to get there, try to get the frequency up so that the athlete is tolerating and benefiting from more or less daily activity. And then there's like progression, you just gradually, build the volume, make the hardest workouts a little bit harder. All of those are universals, but then, the individuation can start immediately thereafter because, the way I put it to athletes is like, this is an experiment. It's like, we don't simply do things, we try things. So, I'll never give an athlete training that I don't have a high degree of confidence in. Like I feel pretty good about, what will result from that training. But I mean, there are always going to be surprises. And, just even in, they don't have to be big surprises. It could be, I could learn, oh, wow, like this athlete really recovers very quickly from speed workouts, but they take longer than a lot of athletes to recover from the long endurance workouts. So I'm like, okay, I need to kind of factor that in. Or, this athlete, when I give them like VO2 max specific stuff, they get like a super quick response to it. Whereas another athlete, they need to chip away at that particular stimulus to start to see the results. So yeah, you just, so everyone's human, everyone's doing more or less the same thing. But if you have that kind of experimental mindset where we're always trying things, not simply doing things, then you can start that individuation process right out of the gate.
Yeah. Because just like words, all these workouts, they're all made up. A 400 meter, repeat workout is arbitrary, right? Yes. But yet if you think that it's going to somehow tell you what your marathon pace is, or, it's not, right? If you miss this workout or you have to do this workout a different way, it doesn't actually affect your results. But people are so attached to, they think it's going to be like baking a cake. You have to have every single ingredient exactly right, or the cake is going to be inedible, Like there's a lot of people that have that black and white mentality, especially runners, have you noticed that? Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's not true, which is good news.
Yes.
And so that's the thing. Like you're not trying to, you're not trying to give runners like you're not trying to tell them what they want to hear, but sometimes like the truth can be like good news. It's like, guess what? It's not like one false move and you're doomed. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Like I know this to be true. I could. So there's individuation where like, the perfect recipe is slightly different for each runner. And it takes a process to find that perfect recipe. But it's also not one perfect recipe for any given runner. I mean, you see this, one way I make the point is like, if you take like an established professional runner, like a well-known, highly decorated professional runner who changes coaches or changes teams in the middle of their career, and you can look at these examples, like they almost always perform at the same level. Like maybe they improve like a tiny little bit. And then you look at like what changed in their training, it'll be like, oh, wow, like actually quite a bit changed.
Right.
And yet they got the same results. So like, it's proof that, there are certain like guardrails that you have to stay within, certain, just like with your diet, it's like, it's not anything goes. So there's guardrails, there's a framework that you need to stay within inside, but there's plenty of room to play. The process doesn't have to go perfectly. You can try things and get more or less the same results. It is not one false move and you're doomed.
Mm-hmm. So the book is Chasing Mastery. Are we doomed to always chase? It sounds like Sisyphus to me. We're just always rolling the stone up the hill just for it to come back down again. Are we destined to chase, or can we ever just achieve and be satisfied?
Yeah, again, to me, I mean, the answer is no, but like that, to me, that is good news. Because I mean,
it sounds tiring.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, like improvement and learning and development are fun. And who wants that to stop?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a perfect way to wrap things up. So, again, the book is Chasing Mastery. When does it come out and where can people get it?
It's out now. And the nice thing about this book is not only am I the author, I am also the publisher of this book. I and a couple of colleagues started 80/20 Publishing, which is kind of a spin-off of 80/20 Endurance, a company I also co-founded. And we just put out a handful of books a year. We're like endurance sports endemic, but it's nice because you're an author as well. So like it's hard to get a book published, the traditional way. You got to get an agent, and then the agent's got to, get a deal from a publisher. For me now, like I never have to worry about that ever again.
Fabulous.
But we're distributed through Simon & Schuster, which everyone's heard of. So anywhere books are sold, you can find Chasing Mastery.
Fabulous. Well, Matt, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for talking with me. And where can people connect with you?
You can find me through my personal website, mattfitzgerald.org, and also dreamrun.com and 8020endurance.com.
All right. Thanks so much, Matt.
My pleasure.
And now it's time for the Mental Strength Minute. Fortify your mind in 60 seconds or less. Today's topic is suffering is optional. It's been said that the definition of suffering is wishing things were different. Pain will come in life and in running, but it's how you think of it that makes all the difference. So when you're running hard, you will feel things like fatigue or a burning sensation in your legs and your lungs. Accept it as simply signs that you are working hard. Allow yourself to feel it and experience it, but remind yourself that you don't have to suffer. Embracing the hard parts of running and life is not easy, but suffering is optional. Thank you for listening to The Planted Runner, part of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Don't forget that you can enter to win a free custom training plan for your next race and get featured on the show. Just write an Apple Podcast review and enter at theplantedrunner.com/PRLab. Of course, reviews are the #1 way to boost this show's reach, and it's a great way to tell me what you'd like to hear next because I read every single one. Have a great run today.